In the first half of 2025, China's crumbling economy has once again taken center stage, drawing sharp attention and growing alarm both domestically and internationally. On Chinese social media, an artificial wave of optimism is being pushed. Many claim the country has finally clawed its way out of a brutal 2 to 3 year slump, and some even boast that China is outpacing the US in global competition. But beneath the surface, the illusion begins to fall apart. A closer look at the cold, hard data reveals a much darker truth. This recovery is a mirage, carefully engineered by state propaganda and short-term policy band-aids. In reality, China's economy isn't rebounding, it's sinking even deeper. From collapsing real estate and surging youth unemployment to chronic deflation and worsening structural imbalances, every signal points to an economy in freefall. Hopes of a turnaround are fading fast. Toronto Fangmian, a well-known independent commentator, recently unveiled a piercing and comprehensive analysis of China's economic landscape in early 2025, exposing the full extent of the downturn through multiple lenses: deflation, fiscal crisis, property collapse, a jobless generation, and a system in terminal decline. Deflation, a stubborn shadow that refuses to fade. CPI, still frozen, still falling. Deflation was already strangling China's economy in 2024, dragging down consumption, suffocating factories, hurting trade, and gutting jobs. It's a ticking time bomb for the country's future. In early 2025, Beijing fired off a volley of stimulus policies, lavish subsidies, aggressive rate cuts, and eye-watering spending packages. But the numbers tell a different story. The deflation beast still roams free. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, a key measure of inflation, offered a brief flicker of hope in January, buoyed by a temporary consumer subsidy. But that spark died quickly. CPI fell back into negative territory, averaging below 0% from January to April. This isn't just far from the ideal 2% inflation target. It's worse than the same stretch in 2024, where at least CPI stayed positive in most months. This persistent decline screams one thing: consumers are scared to spend, and demand is stuck in the mud. Even a colossal 720 billion yuan old-for-new trade-in scheme, launched in October 2024, only managed to pump up sales for a handful of subsidized goods like smartphones and homes. Meanwhile, sales of non-subsidized items barely moved, and overall consumption actually fell below last year's already weak levels, behind the failure of stimulus measures. In September 2024, the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo finally shifted from denial to desperation, admitting deflation and calling for increased consumption. Yet despite aggressive rate cuts and sky-high subsidies throughout early 2025, the deflation crisis remains untouched. In stark contrast, the U.S. tackled inflation head-on in 2022, with sharp interest rate hikes that effectively cooled the economy, demonstrating what competent policy execution looks like. China's repeated failures in the face of deflation expose the growing impotence of its macroeconomic tools. Deflation is now more than an economic issue. It's a chokehold. It's crushing consumer confidence, squeezing businesses to the edge, killing off investment, and suffocating job creation. Worst of all, Beijing appears to have run out of effective weapons. The threat of long-term deflation is no longer a warning. It's already the biggest roadblock to China's economic survival. Real estate is collapsing faster than ever, and it's dragging China's land finance into deeper crisis. China's real estate crisis, long a ticking time bomb, has now become an unstoppable collapse. This isn't just a housing issue, it's unraveling household wealth, draining land finance, and decimating local government revenue, all while shaking the foundation of national economic stability. Despite ramping up support in early 2025, the property market didn't recover. It deteriorated faster and deeper. Since the property bubble burst in 2021, investment has only gone in one direction: down. From January to April 2025, real estate investment plunged 10.3% year-on-year, worse than the 10.1% seen in the same period of 2024. The sales area of commercial housing fell by 2.8%, new construction dropped 23.8%, and land transaction prices in 100 cities crashed by 46.4%. These figures expose a grim truth. Even after the government doubled its subsidies and repeatedly slashed mortgage and housing fund rates, nothing could stop the downward spiral. Prices keep falling. Confidence is shattered. Demand is vanishing. The collapse in land sales is now gutting local government finances. Once a lifeline for local revenue, land finance is in freefall. With official data tightly controlled, private surveys offer a disturbing picture. Things are far worse than in 2024. In one poll of 5,000 employees, 26.6% of civil servants reported delayed salaries or bonuses, higher than the overall average. As local finances unravel, governments lose the ability to stabilize the property sector, creating a vicious feedback loop. The expanding real estate crisis isn't just a risk, it's already a runaway disaster threatening the entire economy. Youth unemployment and private economy, continued deterioration of structural problems. Beyond deflation and real estate, China's structural rot is spreading, infecting the job market and suffocating the private sector. Youth unemployment rate rises instead of falls. In April 2025, China's official youth unemployment rate surged to 15.8%, up from 14.7% a year earlier, a new high. Although the number dipped slightly due to seasonal effects, the broader picture is bleak. More graduates, fewer jobs, and vanishing opportunities. Worse yet, the official numbers may be hiding the full extent of the crisis. Online forums and public sentiment point to a reality far more severe. Many young people are facing a future of graduation into unemployment, fueling frustration, despair, and growing social instability. Low investment in the private economy. Private investment is the heartbeat of market confidence, and right now it's barely alive. From January to April 2025, fixed asset investment by private firms grew a meager 0.2%. Even lower than the dismal 0.3% in the same period of 2024. Meanwhile, state-owned enterprises surged ahead with 6.2% growth. This glaring contrast highlights a deeper crisis. Despite the government's repeated pledges to support private businesses, the reality is a silent retreat. Private capital is pulling back, and the government's promises are falling flat. Hidden concerns behind GDP growth. China's GDP grew 5.4% in the first quarter of 2025. On paper, it looks solid. But beneath the surface lies a dangerous illusion. This growth is driven almost entirely by short-term government spending and desperate export pushes, not by a true economic rebound. Government consumption alone contributed 1.2% to GDP, 6 times the 2024 average, and even surpassing levels during the COVID peak in 2022. Worse, much of the export boost comes from factories rushing to beat new U.S. tariffs, not rising global demand. This is not sustainable growth. It's a mirage that masks deep-rooted problems: weak domestic consumption, fragile private investment, and an economy increasingly dependent on government handouts and construction projects. The foundation is crumbling. U.S.-China trade war and external challenges. The specter of the U.S.-China trade war continues to loom large. Although a temporary ceasefire was declared in May and some factories resumed work, the uncertainty remains high. Goldman Sachs warns that if Chinese exports to the U.S. are fully blocked, GDP growth could plunge by 3 percentage points, affecting up to 20 million jobs. In another ominous sign, China's 30-year Treasury bond yield has dropped to just 1.888%, even lower than Japan's 2.29%. This reflects a bleak long-term outlook and collapsing global confidence in China's economic future, public opinion manipulation, and optimistic illusion. Despite worsening fundamentals, public sentiment in China has been artificially pumped with optimism. From hyped-up tech breakthroughs like DeepSeek and Nezha Auto to flashy military developments like the J-10, the narrative of East rising, West falling is dominating the airwaves. But as Morgan Stanley sharply put it, poised for improvement, but the reality is grim. This orchestrated optimism has buried real social unrest. Incidents like the Wuhan shooting, the 800-brother factory arson due to unpaid wages, and echoes of the Sitong Bridge protest barely registered, muted by the controlled media climate. The result? A dangerously false sense of calm and progress. But manufactured hope doesn't last. The more public opinion is manipulated, the greater the backlash when truth surfaces. When the illusion shatters, public disappointment could erupt into real instability. The long road to economic recovery. So far, 2025 has brought no relief, only deeper pain. Deflation persists, the real estate crisis worsens, youth unemployment breaks new records, and private business investment has all but stalled. Government measures like subsidies, interest rate cuts, and infrastructure splurges have done little to reverse the tide, exposing just how powerless current policies really are. According to Toronto Fangmian, China's path to recovery hinges on more than short-term fixes. The country must confront its structural rot, restore faith in the private sector, and rebuild consumer confidence. But with the U.S.-China trade war dragging on and social tensions simmering beneath the surface, the second half of 2025 may bring not recovery, but reckoning. Expert, China's manufacturing resilience zone is collapsing. The economic shock has only just begun. Compared to the Xi'an China manufacturing PMI, which fell from 50.4 in April to 48.3 in May, the official manufacturing PMI released last Saturday, May 31st, by China's National Bureau of Statistics rose from 49.0 in April to 49.5 in May. However, it still remained in contraction territory, below 50. The Xi'an survey was conducted between May 12 and May 21st, while the National Bureau of Statistics survey typically takes place between the 22nd and 25th of each month. Professor Sun Guoxiang pointed out that the Xi'an PMI sample mainly consists of private small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and export-oriented companies. Compared to the official data, this group is more sensitive to market fluctuations, meaning that in the current downturn, SMEs are bearing the brunt of the impact. These companies generally face difficulties in accessing financing, cannot withstand raw material price volatility, lack policy support, and risk hedging capabilities. Once orders decline, they have little cushion to fall back on and can quickly fall into cash flow crises, or even bankruptcy and liquidation. David Huang noted that the Xi'an PMI survey is less susceptible to interference and data embellishment by local governments. Therefore, when the Xi'an PMI weakens first, it indicates that SMEs, the resilience zone of China's manufacturing sector, are now collapsing. These small businesses typically rely on volume-based profit strategies, flexible supply chains, and short-term non-bank financing to stay afloat. They play a direct role in stabilizing employment in suburban areas and act as an income stabilizer for society's lower income classes. When the weakening indicators no longer stem from the giants, but from the capillaries within the resilience zone, the economic shock has only just begun, he said. According to Xi'an data, employment in the manufacturing sector continues to decline. Over the past 9 months, the employment index has fallen below the 50 threshold, which separates growth from contraction 8 times. Enterprises are facing tremendous market pressures and are not inclined to expand hiring. David Huang observed that prolonged contraction in manufacturing will first impact employment, especially for skilled workers such as electronic assemblers, textile workers, and metal/plastic mold operators. Even if they manage to keep their jobs, their real incomes are not increasing. Looking ahead, potential waves of layoffs among export-oriented enterprises in Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Fujian are an area of particular concern.